Hello, everyone. Today, we are about to have one of the last plenary sessions of this conference. And we have some wonderful guests here today. Um, so this session is titled MyData in Context. And so we here at MyData, we share the vision for a more fair, sustainable, and prosperous digital society. We know that the current ways of managing people's data need to be improved. But how is it all connected, especially with the big challenges and changes taking place in the world today? What potential does MyData have for mitigating or even overcoming some of these? In this session, we will have three speakers. The first speaker is Jeni Tennison. She is the Vice President and Chief Strategy Advisor at the Open Data Institute. She joined the Open Data Institute as Technical Director in 2012. She became the CEO in 2016 and Vice President in 2020. She's also served on the W3C's Technical Architecture Group from 2011 to 2015, co-chaired the W3C's CSV on the Web Working Group. She sits on the advisory board for the Open Contracting Partnership, the board of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, the UK's Health Tech Advisory Board, and she advises the board of Open UK. Jeni will be talking about how MyData fits within the wider contextual challenges and changes, and how we should base out actions on purpose-driven data use. Her talk will be inspiring and eye-opening, and it'll be followed by two real-world examples. I'll introduce the other speakers as they start to speak. Before we go on, I want to direct your attention to how you can ask questions. So I'm going to share my screen, and I think you're all familiar with this stage by now. If you go here to the main stage and you click on here, then you'll see this screen. And if you go here, your questions on this tab, you can type your question and we'll see it and we'll try to get it answered. We'll ask the speakers if we have time. Without further ado, I think Jeni, would you like to begin, please?
Thanks very much, and thank you for having me, and also for those of you that are either staying up late or getting up early, or in any case, using up some of your family time at the weekend to join us today. I'm just going to try and share my screen, and hopefully you will see the start of my slides. Chris, could you just give me a thumbs up to tell me that you can see them? Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk a bit about why we care about data, or why certainly I care about data, and then some of the challenges that there are around governance of data. In particular, how should we govern data that's about lots of us, and what are the kinds of challenges that are coming up? And these are really based on, experiences at ODI, but also some of the work that I've been doing as another thing, which I don't think you listed, which is being the co-chair of the Data Governance Working Group of the Global Partnership for AI, which is a new group that's been set up this year, which I'm happy to talk about a little bit more if it comes up. So this is the broad outline for my talk. And first of all, I'm going to dig in a bit to why do we care about data? So For me and for us at the Open Data Institute, what we really want is a world where data works for everyone, for all types of people, where people, organizations, communities use data to make better decisions and are protected from harmful impacts. And we think about it in terms of a really kind of simple value chain. The place where data has an impact is when it gets to decision makers in forms that they can understand, they can use, that change the decisions that they make, that mean that the things that they do, the way that they act on the world are different. Whether it's us, you know, choosing our commute route or the route to travel to somewhere, through to kind of policy makers making informed policies. And to get data to decision makers in ways that they use and understand, then we need innovators to create useful tools that support those decision makers. And we need data to be getting to those into those tools. So we need organizations that steward that data and share it with others. And where this kind of, for me, impacts on the issues that this community care about is that people really are at the heart of the data that we care about most. Lots of data that we use is about people, or it's about our activities, even if it's not explicitly about any particular individuals. And almost all of the uses of data, to make them useful, they affect people's lives. So even data that isn't kind of personal data as we would understand it legally is still data that affects us. And that means that we have to care about the way in which it impacts on people, data impacts on people. And data about just one person, I mean, as this community really knows, is useful. It can help us improve. It can personalize the products and the services that we use. But it's really data about lots of us that we use for these larger kinds of, for larger purposes, for larger issues and challenges. Data about lots of us means that we can highlight patterns, we can make predictions, it helps us to plan, it helps us to act collectively. And for many of us, then the kind of drivers for what we think data should be used for are really summed up in the Sustainable Development Goals. You know, this, although it's sometimes interpreted as meaning as only being applicable to low and middle income countries, to the developing world, all of these issues are issues that are facing all of us. So we all want good health, we all want quality education, we all need climate action. So these Sustainable Development Goals for me form a kind of North Star for where we should be heading with our uses of data. And not just in terms of what we need to be measuring with data to understand how well we're doing against these goals, but also how we use data in order to address them. So just pulling out some examples, you know, good health relies on things like symptom tracking, health records, biobanks, data about people with rare conditions. And in all of these cases, this is data that we individually can get hold of, that's when it's about us. You know, many of us have been using symptom tracking applications over the course of the past year in order to both inform ourselves and see how our health and symptoms have changed over time, but also to contribute into broader pools of data that help policymakers, that help health practitioners to track how COVID-19 is spreading. Also applies in climate action. You know, we can each get hold of data about our energy consumption. If we generate energy, we have data about that. Our uses of transport usage is one major contributor to climate change, and we can get hold of data from that. And we can get hold of data about the supply chains of the products that we use as well. And the other thing, another one that I just really wanted to pull out, I mean, health has been obviously a really important issue this year. Climate change is the pressing issue for the globe over the next 10 years, 5 years. Good jobs is going to be a massive issue over the next year or two as we come through a COVID recession. So things about pay and perks, working conditions, the experience of workers in the gig economy, all are relevant data for helping us to inform what good jobs look like and what the current working landscape looks like. And again, all data that is about us as individuals that we can get hold of as individuals, but data that collectively could contribute to a broader understanding towards those sustainable development goals. When we have data that is about lots of us, the big question is, how should we govern it? How should we manage it? How should we make sure that it is used in ways that are appropriate, shared with organizations who are trusted with it, and so on? And there are 4 kinds of patterns that I'm seeing, and different kinds of models that come out. There's an individual model, which we're very used to, in particular with GDPR. You make choices about data that is about you. You have that control, and you look after your interests using those rights and those legal mechanisms that you have. But there are these new kinds of models that are coming out to give different kinds of models of decision making over choices that are made about data, whether that's about collection or use or reuse and sharing. There's a model where you delegate your rights to somebody else, for example, sometimes called a fiduciary, and that person or organization makes choices about the data that is about you for you, alleviates you of some of those responsibilities, and you have to kind of trust that they're going to make those choices in your best interests, or in the interests that match your own. We also see models that are based around collectives, so where a group of people collectively makes choices about the data that's about them, about all of them. So sometimes these are called collaboratives or unions, and so on. And then there's the more kind of participative or community focused or democratic kind of mode of choice about data. And that's where the choices about data are made about everyone in the community. And that distinction between collective and communal or participative decision making around data, I think, is an important one in ways that we'll come on to a bit later on. And just to give you an example of that last one, in many of our societies, and most of our societies, we have a regular census. That census is laid down in law based on democratic control from, it's the law is generated through democracy. The National Statistics Offices carry out that census on behalf of all of us so that we can all benefit. So that's the kind of participative, democratic kind of governance of data that I wanted to highlight. At ODI, then, we've been looking a lot at these kinds of new kinds of organisations and existing kinds of organisations that are there to steward data on behalf of some group of people in order to unlock either economic or social value. So we've been looking at data institutions that either hold data on behalf of an organisation or person or group of them and share it with others that want to use it for a particular purpose. But also data institutions that kind of add value by combining or linking data from different kinds of sources, or that come together in order to maintain common data infrastructure for a sector or domain. So my favorite example of that is the OpenStreetMap community, which together maintains that common data infrastructure. And this kind of institutional mechanisms for governing data, new kinds of organizations that are set up in order to manage data on behalf of us, or on behalf of groups of us, or on behalf of all of us, we think are really important, but also have some real challenges, which I'll come on to. And these kinds of recognition of these kinds of new forms of institution is also growing. So this year then, or even in the past month, and the EU Data Governance Act has come out, which includes the notion of altruism organisations that you as an individual might altruistically provide data to, and that they then manage that data, govern that data, and might share it on for other kind of for good type purposes. It's also really interesting to look at the draft non-personal data framework that's come out of India this year. There, the non-personal part, it includes data that is derived from personal data. So even when it's anonymized or when it's aggregated. So this does include data that's about us. It highlights the notion of data trustees for this type of data. So that kind of delegated responsibility for making choices over data for many of us. But there are challenges with, sorry, flipping through when I don't want to. There are challenges with these kinds of models. And I think that we often look at the world as it is and are unhappy with the world as it is, in particular, the kind of dominant private sector control of data that is about us as societies and as individuals, and think that anything must be better. But just because there are alternatives doesn't mean those alternatives don't come with risks as well. So I just wanted to highlight some of those challenges too. And it's important for us to recognize them so that we can mitigate them and address them. As part of this, I would really, a lot of my thinking around this has been inspired over the past few weeks by this amazing paper from Salome Villian on democratic data, a relational theory for data governance. It's a dense paper, but it is well worth reading the 60 pages and getting the kind of framework that she proposes into your heads, and the kind of examples that she has. I found it really inspirational, so I'm just trying to throw it around to whoever will read it. Oops, sorry, there was a link on that paper which meant that slide problems. Right. So the thing that paper really highlights is this piece that data that is about you also is about other people, and the choices that you make about data that is about you doesn't just affect you, it affects others as well. And the three things that I just really want to pull out about that. First of all, that this is a particular phenomenon because of the types of data processing that we do. It's all about finding clusters and patterns amongst big data sets that are about lots of people. And the point of that is that it means that small pieces of data about somebody else can get combined with lots of data about other people in order to find out information about that other person through association. And it's that kind of relationship between us and others that causes this kind of impact to happen, that data about us is also about other people and therefore affects them. Second thing that's really important to pull out is that individual interests, our interests for ourselves, can run counter to the interests of collectives or communities. As individuals, we can make altruistic choices. We can choose to deprioritize our own interests. So and sometimes we're forced to deprioritize our own interests on behalf for other people. So for example, when we pay tax, that's not in our interest, that's in other people's interest, it's in our collective interest. So the individual interest can run counter to collective or community interests. And so we have to think about what that means when it comes to data. For example, if we create fiduciaries that are legally bound to put our interests, individual interests first, then they maybe can't make those more altruistic choices about the use of data that is about us. And third thing I wanted to pull out is that the set of data subjects in a data set, so i.e. the data the people that data is about, is not the same as the set of people who are affected by the use of that data. And there can indeed be a conflict of interest between those two groups. So for example, this is an example in Salome Villion's paper, that if I donate images, if I'm a gang member and I donate images of my tattoos into a tattoo database, that database might do that willingly and happily because I'm getting some benefit out of it. But that database is then used in order to identify other gang members. They have had no control over the use of that data in that context. The people who are affected are different from the people who are the subjects of data. And I think this has big kind of implications for the way in which we frame collective decision making in these contexts. The second set of challenges that I really wanted to bring out is that again, being clear-eyed about these different institutional models that we're putting in place, just because they're new and because they're not the same as the kind of private sector approaches that that we're kind of railing against, doesn't mean that they're going to work as intended either. So, you know, let's take the example where we have individuals making choices about who they delegate control to or which collectives they take part in. The choices that they need to make and the information they need to make those choices, the challenges around that are similar to those about the choices that we make about the use of other digital services. There can still be corruption and conflicts of interest. So people and organizations can still break the law, whether they're collectives and cooperatives or whether they're fiduciaries or not. Still, that can still happen. Things can still go wrong. And so we still need to have that kind of backup of detection and enforcement and redress around these new kinds of models. There's this challenge of participation. So just because you say something is a collective or a democratic or a participative mode of organization doesn't mean that it actually is. We label democracies as being democracies all the time when they're not like truly participative. And there's a whole kind of arena of thought around what democratic participation actually means. So it's no guarantee that data institutions, even these collective ones, are actually going to be participative and really enable control from by the people that are affected by uses of data or that contribute to it. On a more kind of practical level, any institution like this is going to have the challenge of financial sustainability. And this is something that we've been digging into a fair bit at ODI, how the business models and fiscal incentives within a particular data institution, even when it's a collective, even when it's setting out to do good, can still undermine the institutional purpose. We see this all the time with institutions that in order to maintain their, in order to get some money in order to maintain their systems, they have to charge for access to data, even when they're set up to share data. And the final point I just wanted to make is around differential engagement and uptake. The people who have the time and capacity and interest to get engaged in these questions about uses of data are a subset of the people that there are in the world, and we need to recognize that and take account of it in the kinds of participation structures that we put into place. It's essential to have diversity and equity and inclusion, all these good things in the kind of structures that we make. And just saying that we're doing something for good doesn't make it doesn't mean that happens automatically. We have to really work at it. And so, you know, my kind of plea is for us to take the same kind of, make these same arguments about responsible innovation, make sure that they're also being applied to these new models of participation and new models of collective kind of data access. So, you know, there are principles around this, around diverse participation, around thinking about what the potential consequences are of the things that we're building, having explicit monitoring and evaluation and learning built into the systems, and I mean that in the widest sense, that we're building, whether those are kind of ecosystems if you're a policymaker, or technical systems if you're a technologist. And making sure that we have good accountability and redress structures in place, that we recognize that things are and will go wrong, and that people who are affected by that need to be able to, we need to be able to spot it. We need to be able to hold organizations accountable when it happens, and the people that are affected need to have redress for it. And so for me then, one of our big challenges as we start exploring these different kinds of models is how we put the right kind of environment in place such that this innovation around these new models to do with bringing data together about lots of people are done in a safe way. So that was all I wanted to say, really. Just to summarize, data can really help with our big global challenges, and I really believe that. And I do think that these new institutional approaches to governing data are extremely promising. They are the route that we have to be investigating. I'm certain of it. But we also need to be careful as we innovate with them, and they won't automatically be good for everyone. And so we need to be really thoughtful as we do that innovation. And that includes at the kind of policymaker level, as I say, right down to those of us who are playing with the tech. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeni. That was really great. I think you probably missed the chat, but there's been a lot of people who really liked what you said, and they're asking if you're going to share the slides.
Yes, certainly. Really happy to do that. I'll send them through.
Okay, great. Thank you. There was a question on Mentimeter. So yeah, I think this is the first question that I think we will ask. How much discussion has there been on having CO2 data collected from payment lines in invoices and receipts for the individual and summed up for the nation?
So that's a good question. I am not myself an expert on carbon data, carbon related data. So I'm sure that there might be other people that are in the audience that can answer some of that. And I'd also just highlight that at ODI, we've been doing some work as part of our partnership with Microsoft, specifically digging into the ways in which data and these new kinds of data institutions and collaborations might help around the climate crisis in various different kinds of ways. And we're expecting to put a paper out about that next month in January. So I'm afraid I can't answer that one specifically, but maybe there are some others who can.
Well, actually, our next speaker is an expert in that, so I think I'll ask her that question again afterwards.
Good idea.
There's some other questions. So I think, and this one I'm interested about this as well. So what do you think about blockchains and the problem with DAOs as governance innovation?
How can I sum this up? So first of all, I have some severe doubts about blockchains from the point of view of whether they're necessary, from the point of view of whether they are overall climate damaging because of their energy consumption through the kinds of uses that we're seeing, through the kinds of processing that some of them entail. But then in terms of the kind of distributed governance structures and things like that, I'm not a huge expert on them. Again, I'd love to hear and learn more. But from the research that we have done at ODI, I think the thing that came through to me was that there are always boundaries of trust, right? There are always places where you just have to trust that some people are going to be doing the right kind of thing. The blockchain or any technology doesn't take that away. when it comes to these, when it comes to most of the technical solutions like blockchain or others, at the very least, you have to trust the developers who are developing and running those things. It all comes down to people in the end. And so hence, like I'm fairly neutral usually around technologies, because I think that the human governance pieces are the bits that are kind of more challenging and more impactful.
Great, thank you so much. There are some other questions, but I think just for the sake of time, I'm going to try to come back to them afterwards, after the other speakers. Thank you so much, Jeni. That was really, really great. I want to mention here at this point one more time that we do have a place where you can ask questions, and here, if you go to our session and you click on questions, and you can post your questions here. Also, I think another thing that we'd like to see is if you, after hearing Jeni's talk, what purpose-driven data initiatives you would highlight. I think we're very interested to hear what you think, and this information will be used by MyData, and it'll be shared. It'll be shared for making the world a better place. So please take the time to say something if you can. Thank you, Jeni, and let's go to Ilona. Ilona is the Business Development Director of Open Banking and Sustainable Services at Enfuse. She has a bachelor's degree in construction engineering and a master's degree in industrial engineering and management. Ilona has been working in project management, project development, marketing positions in early stage tech companies. She has polished innovation and product management skills, and she has been leading the way, or leading the development of My Carbon Action. This is My Carbon Action as in capitals. So I think it's the name of a tool. It's actually a carbon footprint tool, carbon footprint measurement tool by Enfuse. And since its conception all the way to a successful launch and go to market, she has been working on it. With that, Ilona, would you like to begin? Yes.
Thank you for your great introduction. Can you see my slide? Can you hear me well?
Yes, you're good.
Perfect. Yes, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to speak to you today about Enfuse and our services, service My Carbon Action. Let's start here. Yes, so Enfuse is innovative and a global payment service provider. We offer card issuing and payment processing as a service. We also have additional services like open banking and our newest addition that we launched 1 year ago, sustainability service, My Carbon Action. We are established in the Nordics. We're based in 2016. We currently have over 10 million end users in our platform. All of our services are implemented as a cloud native solutions running on Amazon Web Services. Enfuse is developing and maintaining all of the services per industry best practices, and also known framework when it comes to the security and data protection. So of course, as a card payment processor, we are yearly assessed and certified for PCI DSS level 1. But to follow up excellent presentation of Jeni's, let's have a look on how we enrich personal data and help consumers to make decisions, more sustainable decisions. Yes, so My Carbon Action is a tool that calculates carbon footprint of every purchase a consumer makes. It's about giving them awareness of what is actual environmental impact of their daily actions, and to help them to make more sustainable choices. In a nutshell, we calculate individual carbon footprint. We report the climate change impact of every transaction consumer makes. We track carbon footprint in 6 different categories. Those are nutrition, mobility, housing, consumer goods, leisure, and services. And also, to add educational aspect, we have 100 smart tips. Those are personalized, but we also have some generic suggestions how consumers could lower their daily emissions and become more sustainable. And while the transformation to a low carbon society requires decisions and also actions on a political level, recent research and reports demonstrate that changes in the consumption patterns and also lifestyles are critical and should be an integrated part of addressing climate change. So as around 70% of greenhouse gas emissions are attributed directly to consumer behavior. So it's crystal clear that we cannot meet our climate targets without significant changes in people's lifestyle. So when it comes to My Carbon Action, science is something that we care very, very deeply about. So since the beginning, when we started developing My Carbon Action, for us, it was important to provide reliable and validated calculation methods. And we found a team of experts and professors in the field of sustainable use of materials called DMAT. They are based also here in Finland, and they have been doing different carbon footprint calculations for various products and services. They also have conducted 16 years of research why we should focus on the lifestyle carbon footprint and what are the targets and options to reducing the lifestyle carbon footprint. And actually on the left side, you could see the graph taken from their report 1.5 degree lifestyles, where they compare 5 countries. And DMAT was the one who has selected 5 most crucial consumption domains that impact the individual carbon footprint the most. So those are nutrition, mobility, housing, consumer goods, leisure, and services. And in the graph, you can see the carbon footprint and its breakdown between those consumption domains and also the climate targets for the lifestyle carbon footprint. So they have compared Finland, Japan, China, Brazil, and India. In Finland, we had the highest at 10.4 tons on the average level, in Japan 7.6, in China 4.2, in Brazil 2.8, and in India 2. And if we think about the individual, the climate targets for 2030, the lifestyle carbon footprint on the individual level should be somewhere between 2.5 to 3.2 tons. And for example, if we take a look on Finland, this means that we need to drop our greenhouse gas emissions by almost 80% in only 10 years. So there is a lot that needs to be done. And of course, it's not only about doing the calculation, the carbon calculation based on the transactions, because I'm happy that Jeni also mentioned the Sustainability Development Goals by UN, because this goes very closely in hand with those development goals. Very often on top of the carbon footprint calculation tool, we have sustainability financing, sustainable investment opportunities, also carbon footprint, carbon compensating. So there you could actually support different projects that are based on your visions, based on the values and the strategy, whether you would like to support more prosperity or diversity or inclusion and things like that. So this will also help to tackle that challenge as well. We offer this tool to banks, neobanks, financial institutions, and merchants. And to do the calculation, we need the transaction data that we then enrich with the research data that comes from our partner DMAT. Research data is different life cycle assessment database, consumption statistics, national data, regional data, and so on that we use. And also we combine that with the personal profile information. So with the transaction data, we get merchant category code, merchant ID, amount. So we know that, for example, you went to a local grocery store here in Finland, you made a purchase on 100 euros, and then after that, we categorize each of the transaction. And in this case, it will fall under 2 domains, one being food, so you bought some groceries, and then the second is consumer goods. And when we do the calculation on high level, it is crucial to combine this information with a personal profile. So we have created lifestyle questionnaire, which user need to take during the onboarding stage. And this only will happen after user has given consent to actually they would like to get the calculation, the CO2 calculation based on the transactions. And then after that, they will do the lifestyle test that I will actually demonstrate you in a moment, but based on the answers that we receive from the users, we will create a customer profile, which basically will include different carbon factors. So for example, there's different condition types under those categories. So for food, whether you're vegetarian or meat lover, if you eat red meat and also eating dairy products, you will have a certain carbon factor. And of course, for vegan or vegetarian, pesco-vegetarian as well. So that will add more accuracy to the calculation. Yes, so now let's have a view on our demo. Hopefully it will run smoothly. So when you take My Carbon Action into use, you will first start with the lifestyle questionnaire, and you of course select the country because all of our models are country specific. And then you will answer questions regarding your personal lifestyle. What kind of food do you eat, type of car you drive, and so on. So this combination of personal data with the scientific data will give us more accurate calculation of carbon footprint. After that, you will receive information on your annual lifestyle carbon footprint. You will also see the breakdown between those 6 categories, and you will also know what area you need to focus first if you would like to reduce your individual carbon footprint. Then we will create a profile based on that, and you are good to go. You can view carbon footprint on daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. You could also see the environmental impact of each transaction. You could also provide more information about the transaction. So here, the example of the local grocery store, you could say whether it was a combination of groceries and consumer goods, or purely you bought some groceries. So we will do the recalculation based on that. We can also see the carbon footprint per each category. And in order to add this educational factor and help consumers to understand how they could lower the daily emissions, we have 100 smart tips developed by Citra and our partner DMAT. You could click on the tip, read more about it, and see what is the impact, for example, on annual or weekly level. So it's important to make carbon footprint personal in order to understand it, and then of course act on it. Yes, that was from my side. Thank you so much. Happy to answer your questions. I think, Chris, you're on mute, or at least I cannot hear you.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I was just saying something is happening with my
no, that was amazing, because no, just a few days ago, I was thinking about how nice it would be if I could actually know how much carbon footprint I would be reducing by using my personal data, and it looks like you already have that there. I heard you say that your solution or it's country specific, and I'm wondering in what way is it country specific, and what sort of differences there are?
Yes, there are actually, well, for example, if you remember the slide I showed you with the graph where we compare different countries, and you could see how the lifestyle carbon footprint varies between, for example, Finland and India. So of course, that is why it is important to do the country-specific calculation model, because we use different life cycle assessment databases, for example, to the Europe or to the States or to the Asia, to the Russia, and so on. Then, of course, we combine that with the consumption statistics, and then also some regional and national data to add more accuracy to the calculation. But for example, if we compare the Japan and then also Finland, if you, I cannot show it anymore. I already stopped sharing. But for example, the electricity matters. So in Japan is mostly coal grid electricity. They also are using liquid natural gas, and then in Finland is, for example, district heat and so on. So those kind of aspects are crucial in order to have actual carbon footprint calculated.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. There's a question in Mentimeter. So the question is, why do you use Amazon Web Services as a cloud provider? I guess there's some concerns about that. Sorry, do you want to answer it?
Yes, we actually were the first one to put our platform in the cloud, and now it seems that everyone is doing that. But of course, to have no limits in the capacity and to be able to provide a global solution, this is why, kind of in short.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then there's another question about how many people are using My Carbon Action right now?
Yes, so that's a very good question. So of course, COVID has made some impact on the progress. We have now a few proof of concepts in Europe. So hopefully we will have a first commercial launch next year in Q1. So hopefully then we will have a lot of consumers starting using and understanding the carbon footprint better.
I hope we get to see it in Korea as well.
Yes, I will do my best.
I'll help if I can in any way that I can.
That would be awesome.
There was one other question that I thought was really interesting. So, is it possible, or can the questionnaire and the carbon action calculation be done entirely in my own self-sovereign way without sharing any information with anyone else? Is that possible?
Well, I'm not sure if I understood it correctly. So, for example, we actually have this lifestyle test, which was developed by Citra and our partner DMAT on the Citra's website. And there you could only answer, if you would like to know your baseline, where you at with your current lifestyle choices, you can answer those questions and then see the carbon footprint. Yes, based on that. But of course, if we think about our model, so we offer that to the banks or neo, and of course there, in order to add the more accuracy, we will need to have the lifestyle questionnaire, and there we only store the needed data. So we do not need to know who you are, the customer. So it will be like customer ID, random customer ID, random customer account number, and then of course based on the answers, we will only store the carbon factors and not anything else. So
great. So there was that other question from earlier about how much discussion has there been on having carbon or CO2 data collected from payment lines in invoices and receipts for the individual and summed up for the nation?
Yes, well, quite a lot, like in general, because if we think that now, of course, a lot of people are talking about providing more insights about the environmental impact of different products and services, and these demand comes from the consumers, especially in the Nordic, in the Europe, consumers are very sustainability oriented, so they would like to know. And of course, I think that within 1-2 years, that will be a very strong decision making, so the sustainability aspect. And our model is also built in a way that we can do more detailed calculations. So we could calculate carbon footprint on product level or product category level if we get first of all, of course, the receipt data. So we need to know what you bought, but it's also about the collaboration with the merchants. So we need to receive the data from the whole supply chain about the specific product in order to do that. But that, of course, is ideal because, for example, the receipt data, it's not available if we talk about, for example, our collaboration with the banks. We only get the transaction data. That's why we have to enrich it with the lifestyle information. But definitely this will put, of course, more incentives for the companies become more sustainable to actually reduce the emissions in their supply chains, also select the suppliers based on the environmental impact aspect. So yes, there is a lot of discussions, but of course now, especially if we think that we need to start already acting and to start even doing the kind of good minimum is to do the calculation first based on the transactions, but definitely this is ideal way where we need to go.
Great, thank you so much. There's a hand raised in the audience. Bo, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you. Excellent progress. Really impressed, and
Thank you.
ties together many different things like the fact wallets and so forth we are working on based on distributed data. And the real-time economy program, just briefly, in Finland we have decided that only e-receipts and e-invoices will be allowed anywhere in a couple of years' time. And we have already seen that the major retailers, they are actually providing this CO2 line-specific data in their loyalty programs, but that's obviously not good enough because you may go to 2 different loyalty programs and then you don't get the sum automatically. So now the proposition is that automated VAT reporting, which has to be line specific anyway, should sooner or later be able to send the CO2 data and allergens and whatnot to your personal account through the VAT process. And also to the merchants at how much CO2 has been bought today in your city, in what kind of shops and so forth, so that they know how the sum is going. And obviously you'll get a real-time VAT, you'll get a real-time picture about how much CO2 has been bought in Finland today by what kind of people, what kind of shops, and how does it correlate to weather and news in the papers and whatnot. This is a no-brainer. This will happen. This will happen as soon as you get the thing in place, and naturally the trustworthy IP infrastructure that we are working on under everything, but that's another story. But great progress, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just to add that, I think that it's also important kind of aspect to think this from the user experience point of view, but not to have it in separate apps, but to be able to get the holistic point of view based on all of the transactions and all of your consumption behavior. So, but yes, thank you. That's a good
Great
point.
So we have another. So thank you, Ilona. That was really, really great, and I hope we'll have time to come back and have a discussion with all the panelists. Let's go to Mr. Masahiro Hanatani, and Masahiro Hanatani leads the NTT Data's personal data business in Japan. He is a member of MyData Global. He's proud of it, and that's great. He has engaged in the business development team of NTT Data's financial division. His team created the methodology for business development, which is called DCAP. And using the design methodology, he supports many Japanese companies to create new businesses in this area using the DCAP methodology, and which was his idea. Mr. Hanatani is in Japan, and due to potential internet speed issues, he has prepared a presentation which I'll be showing as a video. he's in the audience right now, and he's live, and he's able to take questions. So please feel free to ask him anything you want. And here we go.
First of all, thank you very much for giving a chance to share our experience in Japan. My name is Hanatani from NTT Data. I am the MyData Global Individual Member and also the committee member of Japanese government. And I have been the leader of Personal Data Trust Bank project in NTT Data for 3 years. NTT Data is a global IT innovator headquartered in Tokyo with business operations in over 50 countries and regions. NTT Data has been among the pioneers of personal data trust banks, helping governments, individuals, and companies to unlock the value of personal data and to benefit from data-driven innovation. A personal data bank is a consent-based personal data management and utilization operator provided by a secure data management infrastructure, such as the one developed by NTT Data. Our vision is data for social good. The competitive advantage of a company is not in retaining the data, but in how it can be used to create customer-oriented services. Personal data trust banks will make it come true. We are aiming for a more self-determined and decentralized society where individuals manage personal data, governments make policies based on such data, and private companies of all sizes with the trust of users continuously create services for them. So how can we bring this vision alive? This is a case. My agent get the same medical service wherever you are. Unfortunately, in Japan, the older person belongs to the hospital. It means we cannot share our medical record between hospitals. That's why once we change the hospitals, we have to explain about the old medical records and body conditions and my favorite or those are my personal informations. So, for example, Natsumi is located in Kyoto 2 years ago, and she suffers from the skin rash. And while on holiday in Hokkaido, Natsumi's rash starts to worsen and unexpected. So she needs some medical attentions. To get some medical advice, she keeps a track of her daily meals through her smartphone and store her information in the PDS profile. And once she goes to clinic and she gives the consent to share her personal data with clinic. And data is shared between Natsumi and the clinics, and a doctor will go through her medical records and provide a more accurate treatment. So this kind of action is one of the way to our visions. Here is another example. Second one is a public health management. This is for against the COVID-19. And NTT Data provide data distribution services for the PCR test result. They can share those information secure manner. And these two is a healthcare area. And also here is economic area. So NTT Data also want to empower the SMEs, such as small medium enterprises, to treat the personal data. For the sustainable growth of local economy, small medium enterprises can use their personal data for the digital marketing. But at this moment, they cannot do that because they do not have enough knowledge or skills or IT resources. That's why we will provide the whole package to make some digital marketing or create a new product using the personal data. So how we actively supporting such a change? We have three ways. First one is a management platform. Second one is a consent management tools. And last one is a whole package for small medium enterprises. The first one is a management platform. Entity data provide the My Information Tracer, so-called MINT. This is a platform with the authentication and the authorization or ID federations. Those key functions for the service providers or service personal data holders. So once those companies connect to the our platform, they can share their personal data with customers' consent, with security, and quickly. So acting as a hub, our services allows the management and the sharing of personal data between those companies. So we start these services in October 2020. And second one is consent management tools. We call these services as a consent wallet because in Japan, many people do not read the terms of services. That's why they don't know who use my personal data. So to support them to understand those terms and services and compare those difficulties or risks among those companies. So we will show some summary of terms of services, and also we will put some risk values. It means that these terms or services share among the many companies. The risk value is high, and also these terms of services is not share the user's personal data, then the risk value is low. So those kind of risk value will show in our platform. That's why people like my father and mother, those kind of old age people can also understand the risk. So once the risk value is high, so they will read carefree. So those functions will support them to understand how to utilize their personal data and who use your personal data. And the last one is a full package of SMEs. Previously, I explained about the SMEs problem, and also that this is another problem. So the current personal data trust bank system is like this. Once users given the consent, personal data trust bank will distribute their personal data to service providers who use their personal data. In this case, once user want to quit the relationship with service provider and request to delete their personal data inside them, their CRM, but users cannot check that service providers truly delete their personal data or not. So we will provide this way. Once service provider want to use the personal data and they get the consent, then service provider will bring their existing personal data or another information to the personal data trust bank. Inside the personal data trust bank, they will analysis or calculate together with personal data inside the personal data trust bank. So it means users' personal data never goes to the service providers. In that sense, once users quit to use the personal data, then service providers never access to the personal data. And this is also for the small medium enterprises, because small medium enterprises doesn't have enough resource for the IT. That's why they don't want to keep their personal data inside their systems. In that sense, their personal data store in personal data trust bank, and they will use or analyze the personal data inside the personal data trust bank, and request them to make some digital marketing services. So this is a way for the small medium enterprises to treat the personal data without the knowledge or skills for digital marketing. And the NTT data will support this package using our technology, Trust Data Hub. This technology gave the access right for the small media enterprises to the inside their personal data trust bank. Even though the personal data trust bank is one database, but the access right is different. That's why we can manage which company can access which personal data. So giving control over personal data back to people can enable collective simultaneous benefits. Personal health and care and public health management and empowerment of SMEs are some among the many areas of entity data is currently focused on. To actuate change by the creation of fundamental tools and the infrastructure. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Masahiro. We have a question in the chat. Is the consent management platform at NTT Data, is it open source, or is it just for NTT?
It's not open source. We will provide the platform and all the company can use, but the platform itself is operated by NTT Data.
I see. And I really liked how you said that the vision is data for social good, right? Yeah, that's really, really great. Actually, before I ask my question, let me just check to see if we do have any questions from Mentimeter, and it does not seem so. So I think I'm free to ask the questions that I want. So NTT Data to me is, I think last year when I went to MyData Global Conference, NTT Data was very prominent. I think it's very clear that you have been in this space for a very long time. And I'm wondering how you see the advancements, how the pace has been, whether you feel like we are going in the right direction, and your outlook on MyData in general.
Yes, in Japan, since 2019, Japanese government set the guideline for the personal data trust bank, and one certificate authority has certificated the 5 personal data trust bank. Now, one of the 5 started business in Japan. So I think the Japanese regulation for the privacy will change in 2022. So from now in 2022, we will have another big wave for the MyData action in Japan, I think.
I see. And if I'm correct, I think it's IT Renmei that does this certification.
Yes, right.
Yes. Okay, cool. And Am I correct to think that data portability rights are not yet protected in Japan?
Right.
And so the question would be, how have you found this to be a bit difficult in your endeavors, and how have you overcome it?
Yes, because in Japan, still there are most companies think the personal data is their own. I mean, a company can control the consumer's personal data, and they storage inside their CRMs. They don't share or open the personal data, even though that personal data is belong to me. So now the Japanese privacy law will change. Consumer can request the company to retrieve their personal data from the company in the digital format. So we do not have any portability, but we can retrieve the personal data from the company and then bring it to the another company. This is something like data portability, but in Japan, this is the best way at this moment.
Yeah, that's what I thought, because it's very similar in Korea too. Yeah, I think Korea and Japan, we should work together and try to get our governments and our people the control over their data that they need.
Yeah.
So I think we have about 5 minutes left. I want to go to a discussion where, or actually probably not even a discussion, maybe just one last question for everyone. And the way I would like to frame this question is by quoting or paraphrasing an article that Auntie Yogi Poikula, the vice chair of our board, wrote. I think it was back in 2017. And he was speaking about his vision for MyData, not just for individuals, but for, he called it group, he called it our data as in one word. And it's on Medium. It's a great article, and it really made me think. And to give you context, basically it goes like this. So if you are in a bus, the people that are in that bus are a group. So that's a group. And I'll share the link. And that's a group, that's a group of people that is moving. But the people that are in that group will change as the bus stops at each stop. And so but the idea is that that group of people, I mean, the people on that bus are still a type of a group. And so the mechanics become very different when we start thinking about groups of people and how to protect their individual privacies. And so with that, I would like to ask each of you if you could give some insight onto what you think is the key difference between individual MyData and then and how it changes, like what sort of radical changes happen when we start thinking about them in groups. Jeni, would you like to begin?
Sure. And I think, you know, the talk that I gave was really all about this, you know. I think we have to recognize, again, I reiterate it, that individual interests are not always aligned with group interests. And even a collective of individual interests is not always aligned with the interests of a whole kind of community or democracy. And I think that poses some kind of challenges around how we see the collective management of data that benefits, like, all of us in a democratic kind of way, versus the kind of individual levels of data that benefit us each individually. And for me, then it's getting the recognizing that those are both important, right? It is still important to be able to, as the examples have shown, be able to pull together data for us individually from multiple different services to give different kinds of insights, to be able to port our data to new services so that we we can, or to, you know, as we go to a new doctor or whatever, to be able to pass that on. That individual data is always important to us. But we need different kinds of collective mechanisms for recognizing rights and controls and good governance over our collective data when it is being used collectively, when it's being used to make decisions about policies and even when it is being used as part of these big systems that are using big data plus individual data in order to actually affect our lives. And I think for us, I think honestly, we're in an amazing time where this is something that we need to be addressing sensibly and rationally and experimentally. We need to be trying out these different kinds of institutional models for managing those kinds of data, and we need to be breaking away from the kinds of, or let me say, enhancing the kinds of legal mechanisms and controls that we have that currently exist at that individual level to recognize these group rights, these collective rights, these public rights over data as well. Getting that balance right is going to be really tricky, I think, but one that this, I think, is our challenge as a community.
Getting the balance right. Great. Thank you, Jeni. Ilona, would you like to go next?
Yes, just to think from kind of my carbon action point of view, of course, our mission is to activate individuals. So each of us needs to take responsibility in order to activate their bigger groups and societies, because of course, first we need to start from the countries and societies that are more willing to develop climate-friendly lifestyle changes, because it's not the same awareness level, the belief in the science and so on in other countries. So of course it's about first starting with the individuals, but then having this impact on the global level. And if we think about how we treat the data, so we are not selling or giving it to anyone else. So it's only between us and the bank, and then for bank then providing the information for each consumer. But definitely then when going on, I think this will be very kind of gold data to kind of do the research, scientific research, what kind of impact it has on the kind of lifestyle changes, and also from the climate change point of view. And then it will help them to make different decisions on the government level, for example. But then, of course, it needs to be taken with care and handled anonymously and so on.
Great, thank you. So that was a call to action for each of us to take responsibility, to feel responsible and do our part. Great, thank you, Ilona. Masahiro, would you like to say the last words, please?
Okay, I think that our personal data is one of the opinion, and also I think the personal data is truly personal, but on the other hand, it has something like a public welfare ideas. So, for example, there's something very huge earthquake coming, then the government asked my personal data without my consent, because I'm already lose my the control. So in that sense, we need to think about the public access to their personal data. That is a little bit difficult, and also have some risks. So we need to more discussion, but we think about the public access to the personal data is one of the important ideas for treat the personal data.
I think that's a really great point. I mean, personal data is our data, but then our data is also, we owe it to society and to the world to share part of our data to make it a better place. Right. Great, thank you so much. I think we are out of time. And I think this was a really great discussion, and thank you so much, guys. I hope we'll continue this discussion further on later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.